My name is Ray, a name that rarely echoes beyond the margins of a lecture hall or the confined space of my studio apartment. As an Omega, I've learned to carry myself in silence, measured, careful, unobtrusive. To most, I am a silhouette, quiet, deferential, disinclined to occupy space I haven't earned. But names, like scents, cling to us. They ground us. They betray our truths, even when we do everything in our power to remain unseen. Before Hael, my world moved with sterile precision. University lectures, sketching sessions, carefully timed walks to avoid crowds during peak heat. I'd trained myself to maintain control over my instincts, over my scent, over the carefully cultivated anonymity that kept me safe. I wasn't unhappy, but I wasn't living either. I existed in the negative space of other people's lives, unobserved, unremarked, odorless. Then he arrived. Hael, an alpha in every sense, brazen, self-possessed, and completely unbothered by boundaries. He was entropy with a grin, chaos wrapped in worn leather, and a voice that lingered longer than it should have. People noticed him before he entered the room. I smelled him before I saw him. He didn't ask to be noticed. He simply was. One day he was a name whispered across the Art Society's gallery walls. The next, he was leaning over my sketch pad, a hint of pine and ozone curling in the air between us. "My name's Hael," he said, settling beside me like he'd always belonged there. "What's yours, quiet artist?" I told him. He said it back like it meant something. And that was the first crack in my composure. He never asked permission to occupy space, mine or anyone else's. He simply did, with the quiet confidence of someone who'd never needed to ask. But he wasn't just any alpha. He was intuitive, dangerously so. He knew how to read the room, how to read me. He recognized the walls I'd built and found every fracture. He didn't barge in. He drifted through the cracks like smoke. He noticed the way I recoiled when others got too close. He kept the right amount of distance until I needed him to close it. He'd text me things like, "What do you think dreams smell like?" Or, "If you drew how you felt instead of what you saw, would anyone recognize you?" He made me feel seen in a way that terrified me. And then one late afternoon, when the sky threatened rain, he brought me a thermos of honeyed tea laced with calming pheromones and said, "You look like you needed a breather." He wasn't wrong. That was the beginning of the threading. Each shared glance, each brush of fingers, each subtle exchange of scent, it built something delicate and devastating. I didn't realize how deeply I'd let him in until I found myself sketching him from memory, again and again. "Draw me," he said. "Not how I look, how you sense me." So I did, and by the time the final line was drawn, I'd already begun to love him. The morning after the gallery show was too bright. Light spilled through the curtains like accusations. Too harsh, too honest. I blinked against it, body curled in a knot I couldn't explain, muscles tight with memory, not rest. I hadn't dreamed, not really. Just echoes of warmth of his voice, of hands that didn't touch me, but still left prints. I told myself I wouldn't go to class. I went anyway. The world doesn't wait for broken Omegas to piece themselves back together. When I stepped into the studio, he was already there. Sketch pad open, legs casually crossed like nothing had changed, like he hadn't pulled the ground out from under me, and smiled while doing it. "Hey, Ghost," he said, voice low and careless. "You look like shit." I didn't answer. The thing about alphas like Hael, they test boundaries, not out of cruelty, but because no one's ever told them they couldn't. "I didn't think you'd come today," he added. I shrugged, walking to my evil. "I didn't come for you." A lie that felt like glass in my throat. We painted in silence, but his scent drifted over to me, uninvited, electric, familiar. A phantom touch. I hated that I knew it by heart. And worse, I hated that part of me leaned toward it. Later, he followed me. Not with his feet, but with his presence. The kind that lingers in your skin, even when you wash it away. We ended up at the cafe by the train tracks. It was my spot, my quiet, and now somehow it was his too. "I figured you'd want chamomile today," he said, sliding the cup across the table. "You smell like static." I didn't ask how he knew. "You're angry," he said after a long silence. No, I replied. You are. You don't get to decide how I feel. Fair, he said, but he didn't stop looking. He asked what he'd done wrong. I wanted to laugh, or scream, or vanish, but I just said, you weren't careful. And that's what hurt the most. Because for a moment, I thought he would be. The sun was already bleeding into the horizon when I stepped onto the rooftop. I had never been up here before. The wind hit first, cool and sharp against my skin, carrying the faint hum of traffic below and the static buzz of something unspoken. Hael stood near the edge, his silhouette haloed by the fading light. He didn't turn when I approached. He didn't need to. You came, he said. You asked, I replied, voice steadier than I felt. He turned then. His eyes weren't just focused, they were expectant, like he'd been preparing for this moment longer than I had. Hael sent. I stared at it. The colors were angry, chaotic, restless. It's loud, I said quietly. So am I sometimes, even when I'm quiet. He turned to face me fully. You're the opposite, Ray. You're quiet even when you're screaming inside. I don't want to miss it. I didn't know what to say, but something inside me loosened, like a breath I'd been holding for too long. He held out his hand. Draw with me. Not for anyone else. Just for us. My fingers hesitated, then reached. We spent an hour sketching on the concrete, backs to the wall, shoulders brushing. Hael laughed at his own attempts and complimented every line of mine. He wasn't trying to impress me. He was present, undeniably, fully here. At some point he looked over and said, You smell different when you're focused, like ink and rain. I flushed so hard my tin slipped. He caught my wrist, gently steadying it. Our eyes met. You don't have to hide everything, Ray. Not from me. The sky deepened into navy. It's getting late, I said, but I didn't move. Hael nodded, then reached into his bag and pulled out a thermos. Same tea, he said. You seem to like it. I took it, fingers brushing his. Warmth spread in my chest. Not from the tea. We sat in silence, sharing the drink. No declarations, no promises. Just quiet understanding. And the knowledge that the thread between us had tightened, even if neither of us knew what that meant yet. The door clicked shut behind me as I stepped into my apartment, dim, quiet, mine. The air felt heavier than usual, thick with everything left unsaid. I set the thermos on the counter and just stood there, staring at it, like it might explain the strange ache curling beneath my ribs. Hael's scent still clung to my jacket. I didn't light any lamps. Instead, I moved through the shadows until I reached my desk. My sketchbook waited for me, like it always did, pages filled with soft lines and controlled chaos. I opened to a blank page and drew him, his eyes first. The next morning, I woke to a message. Hael, show me something you've never shown anyone else. No greeting, no context, just that. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering. He was always like this, intimate, intrusive, and uncomfortably precise. I typed, deleted, typed again. Then I sent him a photo of the sketch I made last night, the one of him, eyes alive on paper. He responded almost instantly. You see me better than I do. I didn't know how to respond, so I didn't. Later that day, I went to campus. The art room was empty, just how I liked it. I pulled out my charcoal set and let my hands move without thought. I didn't realize Hael was watching until his voice broke the silence. You always draw like you're remembering a dream. I froze. He moved closer but stayed behind me. The air shifted with his presence, warm and crackling. You don't have to look at me, he said. Just talk. So I did. I told him about how I hated the noise of the world, how my scent used to flare out of control during heat season, until I started carrying suppressant in my bag like... I turned around. Don't make this harder than it has to be. I'm not trying to make it hard, Hael said, standing slowly, but I think we both know it already is. He stepped closer. I stepped back, but the wall was there. He reached out, not to touch, just to be near. I won't take anything you don't give, but I want to be there. When you're ready. I looked at him, really looked. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel afraid of being seen. Later that night, I opened my sketchbook again. I drew a thread, red and trembling, looping between two hearts that hadn't yet learned how to beat in sync. I don't know what I'm becoming, but I know he's part of it.